Okay, so the meeting of the Standing Committee on Budget Equity and Transparency will now come to order. The time is now 12:04. As Budget Chair, I will now call the roll. Elisa A.J. Foster, present. Donna Jones. Susan Turk, present. Ray Cummings. Dr. Karen Collins Adams.
Present.
CFO Kimberly Johnson.
Present.
And Teresa Danley. Teresa, am I saying your last name correctly? Because I don't think I am.
My husband's family pronounces it Danley, like Stanley.
Danley. Okay, nice. Thank you so much for the correction. Let the record show that we do have a quorum and the committee is ready to proceed. The next item on our agenda is the approval of the minutes from our previous meeting held on August 27th, 2025. The minutes were distributed to all members in advance. Can I have a motion to approve the minutes as presented?
And I move to approve the minutes as presented.
Second.
Is there any discussion? Any corrections to the agenda or meeting minutes? Seeing none, hearing none, all those in favor, if you can hop off mute and say aye.
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 Any opposed? Awesome. Motion carries. The minutes are approved. We will move into our first action item, is our Stifel Investment Advisor. We are joined here by Mr. Lorenzo Boyd to provide an investment update. And again, feel free, members of the committee, to drop questions directly into the chat. Come off mute if you have questions at all for Mr. Boyd, but we will turn it over for him. Thank you.
Well, thanks, everyone. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Lorenzo Boyd, Managing Director of Public Finance for Stifel, and I wanted to bring a quick update on the St. Louis Public Schools, their outstanding bond indebtedness, and then give a couple of quick updates in terms of some of your outstanding bonds as they remain outstanding right now. So can everyone hear me okay? And do I have the ability to share screen?
Do you have the green arrow at the bottom of your screen?
Okay, I think I do. Okay.
Perfect. Yes.
Can everyone see this?
Thank you.
Okay, great. So I'm kind of looking away because I have to look at my other screen to do this, but I'm going to do one thing real quick here. So right now, as you all can see from this, this is a copy of the debt book that I provide to the school district every year, either once a year in March after it makes its bond payments, or either if St. Louis Public Schools does any transaction, whether that transaction be a defeasance or refinancing or new money bonds, if that occurs after March 1st when you make your principal payments on your outstanding bonds. So as you can see from this first page, this debt book that I'm going to go over, it's about 55 pages, but I'm only going to highlight probably 2 or 3 pages in the interest of time. Although I do like to present numbers, I can talk about this for an hour and a half, but I'll condense it for everyone. So as you can see from the debt book, the St. Louis Public Schools has 5 issues that are currently outstanding. So you have your Series 2010 bonds. You'll see the acronym QSCBs. So QSCBs means Qualified School Construction Bonds. So those were authorized back in 2008, 2009 through the American Recovery and Reinvestment Act that was implemented to promote improvements to schools throughout the country. So when those were issued back in 2010, they were issued in the original principal amount of $56,644,000. Right now, there's $47.6 million outstanding, and those bonds are non-callable, meaning they cannot be refunded or refinanced for savings. And I'll go into that in a little bit. Then you have your 2011 bonds. And I will say this, those qualified school construction bonds, which we call Q-Scoobies in the finance world, they are federally subsidized bonds, meaning virtually your entire interest is subsidized by the federal government. So the St. Louis Public Schools receives a check twice a year, once filling out the appropriate paperwork. It used to be on paper, but now it's online to receive subsidy payments from the federal government for basically around 90% of the interest that is paying on those bonds. Then you have your 2011 bonds. Those are qualified zone academy bonds, QZABs. Those were issued for 35 million. Their principal amount outstanding is 35 million, and those are non-callable as well because those are federally subsidized bonds in terms of the interest that you pay on those bonds each year, twice a year in March and September. Then you have your 2017 bonds. Those were issued for 61.9 million roughly. Those outstanding is for 26,570,000. Those have a call date of April 1st, 2026. And I'm sorry, I said earlier your principal payments were paid in March, but they're actually paid in April. So your principal payments are in April and your interest payments are in October. So those are outstanding in the amount of 26,570,000, and those can be refinanced for savings in January of 2026. About 6 or 7 years ago, a new law was implemented that stated you can only issue bonds on a issue refunding bonds or refinance bonds on a tax exempt basis within 90 days of their call date. So with this call date being April 1st, 2026, SLPS can refinance these bonds in January of 2026, which is right around the corner. Then you have your 2023 bonds. As you can recall, those were the bonds where the voters approved 160 million. So the school district issued 135 million in the first tranche. You still have 135 million remaining. Those have a call date of April 1st, 2032. So they can be issued for savings, refinanced for savings, I'm sorry, in January of 2032. And then you have the last tranche of the 160 million that was approved by the voters back in 23. You have your last tranche that was for 25 million, and that was issued in March of 2025. And those are still outstanding for 25 million. Going to the next stanza there for debt limitation and debt capacity. So in the state of Missouri, school districts can issue bonds up to 15% of their assessed valuation. When I first started in this business over 30 years ago, actually, that limit was 5%. They moved it up to 10%. And now you are able to issue bonds up to 15% of your assessed valuation. And I will tell you, I have been meeting with legislators at the state level earlier this year to discuss legislation that would actually approve that, upping that limit to 20%. Obviously, there are a lot of school districts in the state that don't have a healthy assessed valuation like SLPS, but the reason why we're looking at 20% is because a lot of school districts with their low assessed valuation cannot issue a good amount of bonds for various improvements. So upping that will allow them to issue general obligation bonds, which are lower interest rate bonds in the market. So with that being said, your debt limit is 778 million. You currently have 269 million outstanding. So that means you have a legal debt margin of 509 million that you can issue up to your debt limit. That's not to say that SLPS can issue 509 million at no tax rate increase to the voters, but you can go up to your debt limit of 509 million. I'm going to skip ahead for a couple of different pages. So right now, really quickly, this is a spreadsheet that I put together every year for this debt book. The assessed valuation there, your debt service tax rate is 62.11, so 62 cents and 11. So that has been 62.11 for 20 years or so. I've worked with SLPS for since 1996, believe it or not. So that debt limit has been there. The debt levy has been there for as long as I can recall, going back to actually more than 20 years. So at this rate, the district is bringing in a little over 31 million from that debt service levy. That's your Fund 3 levy. You have other revenue. That's a 5-year average that the district puts into its debt service fund for a little over 932 million for the 5-year average. 932,000. So you're bringing in right around $32 million in terms of your debt service fund levy. Right now, you'll see that the SLPS, the next column is your aggregate debt service on all your outstanding bonds. So that's what you're paying each year in terms of principal and interest on all 5 of those outstanding bonds. So as you can see here, 29 million in 2025. Next year, calendar year, you'll be paying 32,299,000 roughly. And then in 2027, 32 million. But you'll see there's a precipitous drop going from 32 million in 2029. Your debt service drops to right around 12 million, and then it's consistent right around 16 million starting in 2034. I think there was a question in the chat. Do you want me to address those questions as they come up?
Yes, please. Thank you.
Okay. So the question was, what is assessment based on? So the assessment is based on your assessed valuation is based on all tangible property within St. Louis Public Schools, their continuous territory. So that includes real estate, that includes any agricultural, and that includes personal property as well. So that assessment is based on all the residential real estate, all the commercial real estate, if there's agricultural real estate in the school district, as well as your personal property. And you'll see that one thing I do want to add, you'll see there your historical assessed valuation growth. You've had some great growth over the past couple of years, so 9.52% roughly in 2024, but it did go down slightly this past year. But your 5-year average based on the last 5 years is 4.23%. So with that, going over this spreadsheet again, you'll see there that your required levy goes from right around, let's just say 61 cents to down to 21 cents and then to 29 cents. You're currently levying 62.11. So in a nutshell, what's happening is you're levying 62.11, which has been that way for years. And I remember having these discussions with Dr. Calvin Adams years and years and years ago when he first started as superintendent in terms of, how this process works, how school districts do no tax rate increases. So what you'll see is that 62.11, your required levy for the next several years is right around 61.5 cents. So you're adding to your fund balance roughly around 300,000 in the next 2 calendar years, around 646,000 in the next years. But then you'll see there you're adding right around $21 million. So the question is, how do school districts, or for that case, any issuer, whether it's a fire district, remember fire districts issue bonds. Well, in your case, St. Louis Public Schools, you're governed by the City of St. Louis Fire Department, but fire districts, cities can issue bonds. So what happens is, because you're levying 62 cents and your debt service goes from roughly 32 million to 12 million, you're only required to levy 21 cents to retire your debt. So that is how issuers issue bonds at no tax rate increase. They use that excess revenue that they're generating to finance new bonds going forward. And you'll see there's quite a bit of revenue that you're adding each year to the district's debt service fund. And I will tell you this, where that green starts, it starts in, what is that, going all the way across in 2029? Is that 2029? Yeah, 2029. But I'm using assessed valuation growth in reassessment years of 1% and then in non-reassessment of 0%. So it's highly possible that in the next reassessment year, that if you get 5% growth, that green that you see there may go up to 2027, meaning you may have more than 100% fund balance. I'm being very conservative in my numbers. You may have more than 100% fund balance in your debt service fund. There are 3 things that any issuer can do in terms of, you're not allowed to have more than 100% in your debt service fund by state law. That's by state law. So you can do one of 3 things. You can either defease debt, which is pay off some of your debt out that you have outstanding. So you see that 21 million, you can use that 21 million to start prepaying some of your existing bonds, or you can lower your debt service tax rate, which no one ever does because all issuers need new improvements, or you can issue new money bonds to soak up that excess revenue that you're generating. So right there, I'll stop. to see if there are any questions. I do have more, but I just want to make sure that there are questions that arise. People can ask those questions. Any questions?
I had a few, just some
Okay.
clarifying questions, and I think too, like to clarify for any of our watching audience who might not be up to speed. Can you just talk a little bit more about those three last options you mentioned? So one is like paying out our debt for the 21 million to prepay some of those existing bonds, lowering the, tax rates, which is probably not recommended, is what I'm hearing. And then the third one is issuing new money bonds. So can you just talk a little bit more about like what those three options really mean and probably
Okay.
like, yeah, I'll stop there.
Absolutely. Great question. So what that means in terms of defeasance or paying off bonds, you're allowed to actually keep your tax rate at 62 cents. So when sorry, not Miss Foster, but Miss Johnson goes to do, and I see Miss Genge in the audience as well. I've worked with her in her previous capacities at Hillsborough, and we've talked about some of those things. So you can use that 21 million, that 21.2 million, instead of lowering your tax rate. When you do your tax forms, it'll tell you have to put in your actual debt service fund balances. Now, if your debt service fund balances are too high, it'll tell you that you actually need to lower your tax rate. But instead of lowering your tax rate, you can take any excess money. So let's show here. You see where you have 26.1 million there after 2028? You're legally allowed to, because you're going to go over 100%, you're legally allowed to actually take some of that 26 million. And let's say we're going to take 20 million. I'm just throwing out a number here. You can take 20 million of those funds because those funds cannot be used for any other purpose. You can't take that 20 million and put it into operating or make improvements. It can only be used to retire some of your outstanding debt. So you can take $20 million, and remember the previous page, I'm going to show this. You can take 20 million of those dollars and actually prepay in 2028 when you're scheduled to get over 100%. Prepay some of those bonds, either your 23 bonds or your 25 bonds, and put that money into an escrow account and prepay that bonds, and it'll legally be off your books. So when you take that 20 million, when you do your actual your financial report or your ASBR and your audit financial statements, you can legally say that we have 20 million of bonds less because we have prepaid those bonds and put them into an escrow account. The next option is to lower your tax rate from 62 cents to, let's say, right around 21 cents, what you see there. Now, the reason why I wouldn't say that's recommended, no one lowers their tax rate, is because for the most part, all school districts, no matter who you are in the state of Missouri, need improvements every 3 to 5 years. So if you lower your tax rate, one of two things will happen. If Ms. Johnson or Dr. Berry or someone comes to me and says, hey, Lorenzo, we've lowered our tax rate to 21 cents. What can we issue at 21 cents? I'll run the numbers and I may say, well, because you lowered your tax rate, you can only issue 10 million of bonds. And they may say, wow, that will not get us anything. We have, too many facilities. But at 62 cents, that number may be 200 million that you can issue for various improvements. And so the question is, if you lower your tax rate, then what you have to do is go to the voters and tell them that it's a tax rate increase. And as you know, your chances of approval go down exponentially when you have to ask for a tax rate increase. And then the next question is, you can issue new money bonds, which I kind of alluded to. You can issue new money bonds at the 62 cents, keep it there, and issue new money bonds for whatever you can at that no tax rate increase.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Mr. Boyd. And then I think we have one more question that came through in the chat.
Okay, let me take a look at that real quick.
And while you're doing that, Mr. Boyd, thank you so much. Could you also, I think, elaborate on what they're saying in the chat for our listening audience, the difference between this fund balance and the actual fund balance they hear all the time in our board meetings?
Okay, great. So what I'll do is I'll answer the first question in the chat, and then I'll go ahead back to your question, Dr. Berry, if that's okay.
Absolutely. Thank you.
So the question was, how does this fit with the state auditor's projection that we'll be bankrupt in 5 years at present spending rate? So that's kind of goes into what you're asking. So your debt service tax rate, I've managed the district's debt service fund and your bonds for, like I said, since 1996. Oh, going on 30 years. I know I don't look 30 years of age, but I have grandchildren now. So I've been around for quite some time. So your debt service tax rate is your fund three that has always remained very healthy. The school district right now, I'll tell you this, has a great underlying credit score, and I'll go into that in the back. Those are different than your operating fund balances. Your operating fund balances are your funds one, two, and four. And so, as you can recall, your operating, especially funds one and two, those funds are used. And I think I have in my debt book, I'm going to go to one thing here, 1 second. The fact sheet. Okay, yeah, great, right here. So what you'll see here, this is something I put in the debt book as well. So what that means is that's your funds one and two, which are used to pay your operating expenses of the school district, whether it's lead for operating all the facilities and salaries and benefits of all your employees. That's what the state auditor is referring to, and that is, according to the projections, may go bankrupt in 5 years if you don't do anything. If you don't do anything with that tax rate. And as you can see right now, back in fiscal year 2025, your incidental fund, which is in any school district, roughly about 90% of your of that fund, $4.37 that you're using, goes to salaries and benefits of district employees and operating your school facilities. So with that 437, if you keep drawing down your fund balance every year, because that 437 is not, your expenditures are exceeding the revenue that's coming in, you're actually deficit spending each year. So I'm just going to throw out a number. If that 437 is generating let's say $160 million a year, but right now you're spending 170 million. So that means you're eating into your fund balance by $10 million each year and drawing down your fund balance. And in the state of Missouri, once you get below 3%, then you're considered fiscally stressed. And so most issuers try to maintain or have policies in place to maintain that operating fund balance above 20%, because then that would allow you to actually not have to do short-term borrowing to get through October and November, because you receive your tax revenue in December, if that makes sense. So if you can keep that fund balance right around 20% and don't dip below that level and keep your expenditures below the revenue that you're generating, then that allows you to not deficit spend and not draw down into your fund balance. Does that answer your question, Dr. Berry?
It does. Thank you.
Yes. And so on the operating side, they're referring to that. On the debt service side, you're looking very good on the debt service side in terms of those numbers.
And
And
just
so
go
go
ahead.
ahead.
I was
Go
just
ahead,
going to remind the public where we're at with our projected fund balance. We are projecting at the end of 25, pending the financial audit, that our fund balance is at 48.57%.
And that's a very good, healthy fund balance in terms of at 48%. But if your expenditures continue to exceed to that fund balance at 48%, and it'll go lower each year.
Can you repeat that, Lorenzo? I'm sorry, you were kind of fading out.
Okay, yeah, so obviously that 48% that you're estimating is a very healthy fund balance. And so if your expenditures continue to exceed your revenue, then obviously you're going to draw down that 48% every year. And I think one thing I was going to show here On this page, you'll see here that roughly, right around 65% of your tax revenue comes from your local taxes every year. Around 28% comes from federal, and just a small amount comes from the state side in terms of 6.5%. So the next page that I'll show you, this is, I'll go through this spreadsheet, make sure I get the last page. This is your debt profile. So what you'll see here, going back to, remember that first page, you see those interest rates on the qualified school construction bonds, 6.1% in 25, which has been paid off, 6.25, 6.35, and 6.45. Here, what you'll see is the federal government is actually paying 5.68% of each one of those interests, each one of those interest rates. So basically, they're subsidizing your, and I'll just do a quick math here. So basically, 5.68, let's do 6.6.25. So basically, they're subsidizing your interest payment 90%. So the district is only paying 10% interest on those bonds, not 10% interest, but 10% of the interest on those bonds. So those are heavily subsidized. That's why those bonds will never be called. And then you'll see here on the qualified zone academy bonds, I mean, those are almost 100% subsidized by the federal government, because you see the interest rate in 2027 is 4.6%, but you're receiving 4.58% from the federal government. So those are basically almost interest-free bonds. So those will never have the ability to be called. And then you'll see here, I think, Ms. Foster, you were asking this question in terms of defeasance. Your 2017 bonds, you can see there back in 2000, if you look at the bottom, back in October of 2024, so just last year, we used right around 14.5 million because your fund balance was getting too high. So that was when Ms. Banks, I think, was there, Angie Banks. We did a defeasance and we paid off that entire 2030 maturity of $14.5 million of bonds. So we used some money from your debt service fund and paid off $14.5 million of bonds early so that you can keep your tax rate at 6211. And then you have your 2023 bonds, and you can see the respective interest rates there. Those were issued for $135 million. And one thing I do want to add, prior to 2023, the school district, St. Louis Public Schools, did not have an underlying credit rating. Your underlying credit rating, think about your underlying credit rating as akin to your individual credit score. So using Dr. Berry, I hate to use you as an example, Dr. Berry, but individual credit scores. If you were to go into a bank with an individual credit score of 750 and you ask for a home loan, they may give you a home loan, let's say, of 6%. But if I go into that same bank and I have a 600 credit score, because my credit score is lower, they're going to give me a much higher interest rate on that home loan. So the higher your credit score, the cheaper your borrowing rate. Here, St. Louis Public Schools has a AA minus. I did an analysis back in 2023 of all major metropolitan school districts in the country that were similar to St. Louis Public Schools. And when I say urban settings, I'm not talking about Hazelwood School District or Ferguson Florissant School District. I'm talking about urban centers, Cleveland, Chicago, Dallas, some of those big urban areas. AA minus was by far the highest rating. And the reason why I waited for years for the school district to go to the rating agencies to get that rating, I wanted the school district to get more on, I guess get better footing and actually increase their percentages in terms of their fund balance percentages, and have more stability, so that when you presented your story to Standard & Poor's, it was more of a positive story. You had great finances and all those various things. And they came back with an underlying credit rating of AA minus, which allows you to borrow at much cheaper rates. By contrast, the City of Chicago Public Schools has a near junk bond rating. If you look at some of the other major metropolitan areas, Detroit Public Schools, I mean, their ratings are like 6 notches below you guys. So in terms of on the debt side, you're very, very well positioned and very strong. So with that, so based on those things, what the state auditor in a nutshell is referring to is your operating. I more lead the efforts on your Fund 3, your debt service side in terms of issuing new money bonds. But that's the thing the auditor wants you to address is some of those deficit spendings going forward so that you're not continuing to draw down your fund balance and get below those 40% levels. And if you get down to those levels, I'll tell you this. If SLPS, the reason why you achieved such a great rating was because those balances were very strong. 48% is very strong. Most school districts probably operate in the 20 to 30% category. So with that being at 48%, if you continue to draw down those fund balance and you get, let's say, below 30%, I'm sorry to say that AA minus next time you go to for a rating may go down, and that's going to increase your borrowing in the capital markets. So you're going to pay more in interest, which is a detriment to SLPS. So those things need to be managed collectively. So keep in mind that not only when you're looking at you've always been in a position to borrow money, and school districts always need to borrow money, but certainly you want to borrow at the lowest possible rate you can so that you can get the most money available to you, if that makes sense. And so one thing I'll go on from the debt book. Were there any other questions? I think I saw 3. I'm not sure if they were based on me. Hold on. So I think Ms. Johnson or Ms. Genge, I think this is probably for you. It was who is AFT local St. Louis 420? Okay, that's the union. Okay. So they were asking about dollars. What does that 48% mean in dollars? That was their question.
Yes, and I think, okay,
I
go ahead.
answered that in the chat.
And just for record, the response was, currently that projected percentage equates to approximately $212 million. However, again, as mentioned, this is subject to change based on the annual finalized audit from CFO.
Great, thanks. So the one thing I do want to bring up, to share my screen. So as you guys recall, 2017 bonds, they have a call date, meaning you can refinance those bonds for savings. So think about bonds like a home mortgage. If you have a home mortgage at 6% and interest rates go down, and you go back to the bank and say you want to refinance your bonds for 4% because rates are now at 4%, you certainly have the ability to do that. So you can take your home loan from 6% to 4%. The same can be done with bonds since they have interest rates. So right now, if you recall, SLPS cannot refinance these bonds, the 2017 bonds, until January of 2026. It takes about 6 to 8 weeks to complete a financing. So ideally, if we were going to look to refinance bonds, we would start this process in November, believe it or not. November, which is, wow, in 3 days. Because it takes about 6 to 8 weeks. And remember, we have 2 holiday seasons coming. Thanksgiving, we have, and the winter break. I hate to put people over to work over the winter break, but this was something that would have to be done by staff in terms of, I would try to do as much as I can on my own, but some things I can't in terms of background information on the school district. But ideally, if the district wanted to refinance these bonds, we would start this process probably right around mid-November and then be scheduled to price at your January board meeting, and so that we can refinance those bonds for savings. So one thing that I presented to Ms. Johnson back in September, I'll bring up 2 refunding memos. And I'm going to do this real quick. So you can see here, back in September 16th, I presented an analysis to the SLPS. So you could refinance some of your bonds of 14.4 million of the 2017 bonds. You can refinance those, and those bonds only go out until those bonds, I think, are retired in 2029. So it's a short refunding. So the final maturity is 2029, but SLPS could actually save about 275,000. That's projection and preliminary. Certainly, if interest rates continue to lower themselves, it can be more. but you can save roughly 275,000 over the course of 3 years in terms of interest savings on those bonds. That comes to 1.84%. Now, the state says that whenever you do refinancings, you must save at least 1.5%, 1.5% on current refundings. So you're obviously above that threshold of 1.5%, where you're saving 1.8, excuse me, 1.84%. So that was great news. So I presented that to the school district and said, hey, I think we should look at refinancing these bonds, and present an engagement letter so that we can move forward with the process. But as you know, that was a month ago. So here's where we are now. Now, what you'll see is October. Now we're below, interest rates have risen. Now we're below the 1.5% threshold. So we've lost the opportunity to actually refinance those bonds because we're below 1.5%. But that's not to say that the Fed won't lower rates. You know, at this Fed meeting, which they're having today, and they won't lower them. They're projected to lower them 4 more times next year. So and interest rates always fluctuate up and down in the municipal market. So it's possible that we start this process in November, and by the time we price in January, you're back over 1.5%. But in the current market right now, what you're seeing is just in a month's time, in 1 month's time, we actually have lost. So I think the interest rate is 3.0% now. It was 2.67% back in September. So you see that's 30 basis points or 0.3% that interest rates have risen. So with that, I've had this situation occur many times, you know, for all of our clients. The process is there's no cost to actually starting this process now, and then actually when interest rates are favorable, refinancing those bonds when the market becomes favorable, and we can refinance those at a moment's notice. So I presented an engagement letter to SLPS that engages Stifel to actually refinance those bonds and move forward with that refinancing as soon as rates become available, and to do a parameters resolution where we can only refinance those bonds. We can only refinance those bonds if savings above the 1.5%. There's no cost to doing that. The only cost is, I will tell you, if we go through the process and you go through the rating process and Standard & Poor's rates you, and they do all the legwork to rate the bonds, but we haven't priced because we need a rating before we price. If you go through that process and we're looking at 14 million of bonds, and they put together their report, and say, for instance, when they put together a report, Standard & Poor's fee is $15,000 for doing that analysis. But if we never do the issue, you never pay Stifel out of your bond proceeds, you never pay the attorneys, but the one cost you will have to absorb will be that rating fee, because the rating agency doesn't care if you issue the bonds or not. They've done the analysis, and obviously we can't sell the bonds until we have their rating. So what we hope and pray is that when you do the rating, we're in a good, favorable market that we can move forward with the pricing. And I think that's pretty much my entire presentation. It took longer than I anticipated, but I'll open up for any questions.
Just one question. So with this letter, and if the board does move forward and approve it, this letter is saying that if we are available or we have the actual number that we reach, we're able to then go forward with the bond.
It's exactly right. So it engages Stifel to put together the financing team, to start the process of doing. There's a lot of paperwork. And I know we have Ms. Gann, she's been through this process before. She knows all the paperwork that's involved. There's a lot of paperwork that goes into, you know, putting the documentation together. So this will authorize us to move forward towards refinancing those bonds in January. So we will start all the paperwork now. Like I said, it takes about 68 weeks. We would have to get on Standard & Poor's schedule. As you know, they book pretty solid in November, December, but we'll get on the schedule hopefully before December or during December to do a rating call, or early January. and then look forward to pricing the bonds when the market is favorable. And I think that would be actually, I think that would be the process that we will pursue.
Then would it then go back before the board prior to actually completing the bond?
Yes, so when we sell the bonds, I will have a call. So what'll happen is I would probably give an update to the board in terms of we're moving forward. So at one of the board meetings, it will be, hey, the school district, St. Louis Public Schools authorized us to move forward, authorized me to sign this document. We're going to move forward with the process. And that is to give them advance notice that in January, we will be back if rates are favorable and price the bonds, and that will be the final approval. So the board meeting in January, we will have already priced the bonds. We usually price bonds on the day of your board meeting. So there'll be a call. We'll go out to investors. There'll be a call with, and you're invited to actually, be on this call, Dr. Berry, Ms. Johnson, definitely, Ms. Gins, definitely. But you're invited to be on this call to actually go through the market. And then you're invited to be on the call with Standard & Poor's as well. But we'll price the bonds, and then that evening at that board meeting, I will come back and present the final results to the Board of Education.
Understood. Thank you.
Mhm.
Lorenzo, just so our audience is aware of S&P, we're in the financial world can you equate what S&P is in terms of like mortgage? Like you gave a good example.
Yeah. So I haven't looked at my credit report in a long time. So whether there are are there still 3 credit rating agencies for individuals? So that's what TransUnion, Equifax, and I think there's another one. I think there's another one. I'm not sure of the name.
Experian.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. It's Experian. So basically, when they look at your credit, that's who looks at your credit for individuals. Standard & Poor's or S&P, they come and they look at the credit of actual governmental entities. There are 3 credit rating agencies. There's Standard & Poor's. Standard & Poor's probably does 90% of Missouri. Then there's Moody's, and then there's Fitch. So they come in and there's probably a rating questionnaire that details about 30 questions. And we usually ask for those questions in advance of the rating call. So for instance, they may ask that you have the rating call on December 16th, okay, with them. We'll ask for those questions on December 6th. So they'll give you 10 days time to answer those questions and send them back to me a day before, and I'll send them to actually Standard & Poor's so that they can have, so you can answer those questions in a thoughtful manner and so that it doesn't take up too much of your time. Because I'll tell you this, 20 years ago, I started doing this process with Standard & Poor's about 10 years ago, or maybe a little over, asking for the questions in advance. Those calls could last 3 hours because they look at your they look at your administrative duties, they look at your they look at the economics of the school district, they look at your enrollment, and they look at your financial stability. So they look at all those things, and they look at board governance too as well. So they look at all those things. So we ask for those questions at least 10 days prior and send them to you so that you can answer those questions and have 10 days to go through your administrative staff and answer those questions thoughtfully. And then at that point, submit them back. And that really helps reduce the time needed for that call.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. So was there another question in the chat? Let me make sure I did.
Board Member Foster, I do have a question for Mr. Boyd.
Yes.
Mr. Boyd, as a result of everything that you presented and our understanding of the process that we need to have in place to be able to get this done in time, we would actually start everything now based on the recommendation of this committee and then bring it to the board for final approval on the November 10th. Does that get us within our timeline? Because that's our next board meeting.
Yes, that gets us within our timeline. So if this process is okay and the board decides to move forward, we signed the engagement. November 10th, I believe I have it on my calendar. Actually, I'm pretty excited. I hate to say this on this call. I'm going on vacation Friday on a cruise. So hopefully Hurricane Melissa is gone. I spent 8 years in the U.S. Navy, and I told my wife I would never go on another ship in my life. And here, 26 straight years we've been going on cruises. So I will go on another ship in my life. So there's 48 of us going on this cruise. So I come back on the following Saturday. So looking at my calendar, we'll be back on that Saturday. I think it's December 8th. I'm not sorry, not December, November 8th. So I think I have on my calendar to come to your board meeting on the 10th.
Yes.
The 10th to be there
That's on Monday. We had to move the board meeting because of Veterans Day. So,
to celebrate me. I'm a veteran.
oh, okay, great. Yes. I'll move it back to Committee Chair Foster, and then we'll, take it from that point. Board Member Foster?
Awesome. Is there any other additional discussion? Seeing none, I would like to make a motion that the Budget Committee moves forward with the recommendation from Lorenzo Boyd with the Stifle committee to move forward with reissuing and financing our bond. Do I have a second that can come off mute in second for record?
I believe it was seconded by AFT.
Okay, I think I'm gonna have my second be Dr. Danley. Oh. We just want to make sure there's a record of us seconding audibly. So
I second.
Thank you. Thank you, Ms. Johnson. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
I
All those opposed? Great. Motion moves forward. Ms. Lorenzo, we look forward to seeing you at our November 10th board meeting.
Thanks for having me. And I will add, I like, presenting to you guys on the standing committee of budget. So one thing I did bring up in my actual, in my presentation, you saw the 6211, something you guys need to decide on moving forward in the next year or so. You have the ability to do some improvements, keeping that tax rate at 62 cents. I do have an engagement letter already in place that was signed by Ms. Banks because before she retired as CFO, we were talking about, we knew this was coming. And so she had talked to the previous administration and got this signed to do bonds up to 225 million. So in the next year, we will probably, I think those projections will happen sooner than 2029 than I'm anticipating. But I would say by 2027, April, next year, we probably should start looking at what to do with all the excess funds, because in 2027, you will be able to do a sizable transaction for improvement. So going through that process of, improvements that are needed by the school district. I just want to kind of put that on your table because that's the next step in terms of, what we need to do to keep that 6211.
Lorenzo, can you quickly give an overview of what that would look like, just for our general audience?
Yes. So I think what I will do is I will put together analysis for how much the SLPS can issue and keeping the tax rate 6211. And I'll bring various scenarios for you. So you'll work with your facilities director to see what improvements are needed throughout SLPS at the various buildings. And that number probably is going to come in way more than 225 million. I'll just say that. I mean, I was born and raised in the city of St. Louis, so I know about all the facilities. I live by Fallon Park in those areas. So you'll need to whittle down that list, because if your facilities department says we have 500 million that we need in improvements, obviously we know we only can do 225 million. You'll need to come up to a conclusion, consensus with the board and the staff, what projects are going to be used for the 220 million. And then at that point, I've already presented to the Board of Education in terms of what you can issue, but it's a matter of district officials deciding what projects are going to go into that 220 million. And once that 220 million is voted, and if it's approved, once you issue that money, you have 3 years to actually spend those proceeds. And one of the things that you saw from the previous Remember when SLPS voted in November, I think it was, of 22 and 160 million. The reason why we only issued 135 million in the first tranche was because when you issue the bonds, the federal government states that you have to reasonably expect to spend your proceeds within a 3-year period. At that point in time, SLPS, when they looked at their spending, they only allotted for 135 million that could be spent in that 3-year period. So that's the only amount that we could issue. That's why it took us 2 more years to get to 25 million. So I'll put together an analysis too to kind of break those tranches up, because I'm pretty sure you wouldn't be able to actually issue all 225 million at once and spend it in a 3-year period, because that's a lot of cranes, a lot of stuff moving in the school district to actually, spend 220 million over the course of 3 years. So in all likelihood, and let's just say it's half, you would issue half of it at once, and then maybe if you voted in 2027 and maybe in 29, issuing the other half. You'll vote it all at once, 225, but you'll issue just half of it. And the other half is just sitting like a letter of credit, or a line of credit, I should say. And then when the administrative officials, Dr. Barry, Ms. Johnson comes back and says, "Hey, Lorenzo, we're going low on our funds. We only have 20 million left, from the 112 million we need to issue the remaining bonds." We can go ahead and do that.
Thank you, Lorenzo. Can you just touch upon what would be the public involvement in this process? Will they have to vote again on the issuance of that 212 million,
Absolutely.
20 million? And can you explain what does that process look like, just an overview?
Yes, they definitely. So anytime you want to issue general obligation bonds, there's 2 things. The reason why the public doesn't have to vote on the refinancing is because it's refinancing new money bonds that were already issued. So they've already voted on that. So you never have to go back to the voters or the public whenever you refinance bonds for savings. But whenever you issue new money bonds, you definitely have to go to the voters, and they have to approve it by 4/7 majority, 57.1%, to issue those bonds. And so if they come back and more than 57% of the voters approve it, I will say, in my time, there's never been a failed election in SLPS for bonds in my 30 years. So each time SLPS went to the voters, it was approved by 4/7 majority. So you would actually put that on the April 2027 ballot, but you would approve the ballot language, let's say in December of 2026. So you have a year's time to kind of start working on it. And the reason why I'm bringing it up, because it takes about 9 to 10 months to kind of start putting those things in order. So I didn't want to leave this important committee without putting that on the table.
Thank you so much. And we can make sure that we have a note on record to continuously bring this up over the next few months to ensure that it lands on the correct agenda.
Yes, and that's a great point. That's in the chat. Local 420 said they passed it 87%. So you only need 57.1% to pass.
Nice. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay, so in the interest of time, we will rapidly move into our next topic, which is our budget and expenditure update. That will be coming.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you, Mr. Boyd.
All right, take care.
Kadeem, are you able to share the document?
And then Ms. Johnson, if you want, we can skip the first few slides.
Yeah.
And jump right into our numbers.
I wanted to jump right into our revenue budget versus actuals. This is a new format that we created to present to not just the budget committee, but also to the public. We feel as if this report is more give a higher level overview, but easier to read than the report that is normally submitted on a budget on the budget website, on the website. What you have seen in the past on the website is we submit to the network superintendents more detailed budget for each school, looking at both their grants, looking at their discretionary fund, and they're used to reading it in that manner. So we created I'm trying to see if it will come up. Yeah, can you, we're gonna bring it up, sorry. Created a more easier to read report. Give me 1 minute, we're gonna try to bring it up. Okay, can you guys see that now?
Hang on. Okay. Now I hit the share.
Awesome. We can see it now. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. So looking at the revenue budget to actuals, this is as of the end of September. What I want to bring your attention to is this includes all of our revenue sources. So when we're talking about our GOB, our general operating, our current budget for just GOB projected for 26 is at $339 million. As you can see, we have received local revenue for the month of September as of $5 million. However, our year-to-date actuals, that's July, August, and September, we're at $14.4 million. So when you're looking at the remaining balance, that is how much are we expecting to get from our current projected budget? So the difference between the current budget, again, that's based on projections as we look at historical amounts, try to estimate what we're considering or hoping we're getting in, especially for local revenue, then the actual amount is saying this is what we have in hand on our books. And then the remaining balance, again, is the difference between actual and budget. And that is what we are hoping to get as the remaining balance. So as you can see, we're in the end of the first quarter, right? First quarter of 26. And you're looking at, let's look at local grants. As you can see, we have budgeted $1.4 million for that. And we've only received 3,091. So we're at nothing, pretty much, negative 0.8%. We haven't even reached 1% of that projected budget. When you go down, I want you to look at food service. As you can see, our food service projected balance is $19.1 million from all of the sources that feed into food service. And right now, we've only received $843,000 from our federal revenue, which means we're at about 4.5%. Moving on down, where we're looking at debt service, our local revenue current budget of what we're expecting to pay is $38.7 million. And from that, we've only received about $214,000. So we're at about 1.2%. At the bottom, when you're seeing the Prop S, remember, let's go back to the 25 million that Lorenzo has just talked about, that we issued the remaining of the 160 million bonds. We issued the remaining 25 million back in March of 25. So now we are including that potential cost in our 26 budget. So when you see the $3.6 million, that is the interest revenue we're expecting to get from that 25 million. So again, this revenue, total revenue budget is about 416 million, which includes our Prop S, which includes our debt service, versus the remaining amount of 395 million. So right now we're at 5.1% of our actual realized actual revenue versus our projected revenue. Any questions on the revenue side?
Yeah, I'll just put it in the chat, but just clarification again, I think we talked about this a little bit last time. But where is the 25 million in Prop S dollars? Because the 3.6 is the interest, I understand you said.
We're gonna show that on the expenditure side.
Thank you.
Click in, just click, and then it'll go down to the next one. Oh, next, okay. All right, let's talk about our expenditures. This is not. This is cut in half, so let's start with our general operating. As you can see, one of our biggest areas, remember, of our expenses, of our budget is our salary and benefits. That's about, I think we presented about 49% if we're looking only at general operating, and a higher percentage when we're looking at everything. So when we're looking at our certificated salaries, we budgeted for 130 million. Right now for September, we have paid out 12.1, but our total payout in salaries is about 23 million, which equals about 17.6% of our projection. Then when we're looking at non-certificated salaries, we budgeted for 51 million. We have paid out just in the month of September about $4.4 million. The first quarter, we've paid out about $11.6 million, which equates to about 22.2% of that budget. Going up to the top, when we talk about benefits, we budgeted for $83 million in benefits. For September, we paid out $7.1 million in benefits, and our total benefits to date that has been paid out is about 13.3%. And when you're looking at that 13.3 million, when we're looking at the percentage, that's about 16% of our original projected budget. So when we're looking at the remaining amount for expenditures that we have to cover for general operating, we gave us a budget of 371 million. This includes all of these items: purchase supplies and materials. We have remaining about 267 million to actually for expenditures, to cover expenditures. Again, when you're looking at the local grants, you can see overall we budgeted for $2.2 million. We still have a remaining budget of 1.9, which is about 11% what we have spent so far. Moving down, I want to just talk about, go to the Prop S. So when you're looking at, let's talk about the Prop S, and when we're talking about that $25 million, remember, this is the new bond, and we're counting that as a total expenditure, not revenue, but as an expenditure. So that 3.6 we saw on the first page for revenue, this is premium that we're expecting to get. This right here is telling us what that $25 million was budgeted for. Benefits, 76,000, but the biggest portion right here is our capital outlay. Those are our Prop S projects that we are currently funding to support under Prop S. So this is the biggest bulk of that. As you can see right here, this line is year-to-date actuals. We have obligated or spent $18.8 million of our projected 22.6, which gives us a remaining amount available to use for Prop S projects only of about $6.6 million. And when you're looking at that total amount is saying we have about 5.8% available, realized of that budget. Any questions on that?
I'm sorry, can you clarify? I think maybe some words got mixed up. Can you clarify the 5.8%? That the 5.8% that is remaining of Prop S dollars
Of that 25 million,
of the 25 million
yes.
that was remaining in the entire Prop S bond though?
No, that's just for the 25 million, because when you see the Prop S here, this is looking at the remaining 135 million we have already issued. So this is saying of that remaining 35 million, we still had budgeted 43.6 million of that 135 million. So this is the new bonds that we are issued, and this was the original bonds that we have issued. Remember, we had a total of 160 million that we could issue in terms of Prop S bonds. The first 135 million, we have already started to receive costs from the year it was actually initiated to still we got costs that are going against that first, what do you call it, tranche of the 135. So this is just saying right here, at the end of the fiscal year, we estimated we had about 48.3 million of that 135 available still in the budget to charge against. We had not spent that. Again, when we're looking at this, our capital outlay, and this is for the month of September, we have spent $7.2 million of that. Year to date, we have spent $29.9 million year to date. That is July, August, and September. And then when you see the $7.7 million, that is what is balance remaining. I just want to, I'm lining up my columns up. So we have the 58.8, let me just make sure my columns will line up, is the original budget. That's the amount that was remaining of the 135. September, we charged 7.7 million just for the month of September. Oh, understand. The 29.5 is what we have encumbered. I apologize, we should have this column at the top. So this right here is, we encumbered this amount, but it hasn't truly been paid off. So we're holding those funds for contracts to be able to pay off. And then our year-to-date encumbrance that we've actually spent, of that encumbrance, of this 29 million, we have spent $7.7 million. So we're holding the money here. This is our encumbrance. Of that 29 million we're holding for projects that we know we have to support, we have taken $7.7 million to actually pay those costs. And then the remaining amount, balance remaining, is the $6 million. And meaning of that 17.7% has been realized to date. Let me go back to no, she's on this one. So I want to just kind of show the heading. This should have been on the second page, and I do apologize for it. Again, let's go back to that Prop S. The original budget that was remaining for Prop S, the first 135 million that was issued, was $58.3 million. Of that, in September, we spent $7.7 million. We have also encumbered a total of 32 million, holding that to pay for contracts. The majority of that is under our capital outlay projects which are the actual projects. Then these year-to-date spend, meaning what have we spent, what have we actually paid for out of the amount that is encumbered. It's the 7.7 million for capital outlay, but total is 8.2. And then you have what is the remaining balance. For that, we have 15.1, which total realization is 14.8. So I'm gonna go to the next page. And that's where you see these numbers.
Okay,
58 budget, September expenditures, encumbrance, how much we have spent of that encumbrance, remaining balance, and then what percentage of that 58 have we spent?
mhm.
Does that
Okay,
help
thank
clear it
you.
all?
Yeah, yeah, and I think the additional questions I have, I can ask offline, but want to open it up to the floor to the rest of the committee. If there are any questions, that anybody wants to voice over. Seeing none. Okay, great. We will move into our last and final item for business, which is updates on our corrective action plans as it relates to our financial and budget audit findings.
Chairwoman Foster, did you want me to go or did you want to, there's a question, I think, in the chat, but you want me to go ahead and go? Or a hand raise, I apologize.
I don't think the question is related to the budget that was presented or expenditures.
Understood.
But if we have time, we can come back to it, but I definitely want to get to this part first, because we're hour 15 in.
Absolutely, that will be brief. So yes, thank you. Just a high level overview of the corrective action plan in the financial realm. So there were 4 main areas we were looking at with the one financial planning in the budget process. And it kind of goes what we just discussed today, talking about the long-term planning. We talked about bonds in addition to a budget review. We are doing quarterly and monthly reviews. Just for instance, we talked about one today, as well as providing public information in a timely manner and also being transparent with these. We are doing trainings, and we do know that we have new policies that we've accepted and implemented here at SLPS. We're looking at disbursements. That was another finding. We're looking at our credit cards. As of now, we have the credit cards that are limited to certain codes, meaning if a department has a credit card, there are only certain object codes that would allow the credit card to be used. And I can use HR for an example. When you utilize the credit card, you can't just go out and purchase something from Sam's. You have to use it for a specific code, like our background checks. Looking at procurement, we are looking at those emergency and sole source documents that we are using and making sure that we are following our processes and the policies, as well as looking at the salaries and ensuring that we are making sure every salary that, especially when we have our new employees, that they are in accordance with the board approved salary schedules and paid in accordance with state statute. And that provides that update. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Berry. Ray, did you want to come off mute and ask your question directly to CFO Johnson or interim superintendent, Dr. Berry?
Thank you very much. In looking at the budget, I apologize for my ignorance in all this matter. I can barely balance my checkbook, so I'm kind of overwhelmed, but I did have a question about how things kind of work. At one time, someone told me that the total number of positions that we have listed, that we have to fund those positions for that particular year. I remember several years ago, as part of our budget cutting, there were a number of positions that hadn't been filled for years and possibly weren't going to be filled were eliminated, and that allowed us, at least on paper, to look like that we have reduced our spending. So my question is, basically, if you eliminate those positions or jobs that haven't been filled for years, how will that affect our bottom line in the budget?
Yes, thank you for your question. We are in the actual act, as you know, of doing staffing transitions. We will be presenting to the board an overall guesstimation of what we think this will save us. But we can also share, though, even with the cost savings, there will be some additions because we have some schools that will need additional staff just based off of their enrollment or what they're doing. But even with the cost savings on the side of the staffing, that still contributes to our overall fund balance spending. So while it will be smaller from our fund balance spending, which I believe Chief Johnson shared at the last board meeting, so I think we were down now to 18 million from the projected 35 million. We will see a cost savings, but we will still be dipping into the fund balance for this, at least this next year.
I understand that, but see, I was here when there was a $60 million budget deficit. There was zero fund balance. And I was part of that team that helped us get on the track of where we're going. That's why, to me, any savings is a savings. A $500,000 here, a mill there, a mill here, all of that can add up. So I'm just trying to bring to the table any possible savings and that we're all on the same page before we start slashing jobs, real jobs. See, these jobs here are just jobs on paper. So that's why I was trying to make sure that we're able to get every single penny that we can squeeze out everywhere without losing jobs.
Absolutely. Thank you. Absolutely.
Is there any further discussion?
No.
Awesome. Okay. So, well, that concludes all of our items on our agenda this afternoon. If I can get a motion to adjourn our meeting.
I move to adjourn the Budget, Equity, and Transparency Budget Committee meeting.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Great. Motion carries. The meeting is adjourned at 1:21 p.m. Thank you, everyone.